Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the show for analytically minded marketers. Let's get straight into today's show. Okay, we're going to talk about being smart versus being helpful. One of the most famous Western philosophers of all time is George William Friedrich Hegel. He influenced other thinkers like Karl Marx, Soren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre. And in his lifetime, he lectured at the universities of Jena, Heidelberg, and between 1818 and 1831, he was at Berlin. As a matter of fact, his lectures there drew students from all over the campus, to the point that the bell tower at the university would be rung to announce the start of Hegel's lectures. People may have flocked to hear him, but that doesn't mean that they understood Hegel. One student who went on to write a biography of him was Karl Rosenkranz, who said, quote, "His lectures were not clear and systematic presentations, but profound expositions of the inner movement of concepts, which often raised more questions than they answered." In another part, he said, quote, "The students often complained that Hegel was difficult to understand." Many moons ago, I was a political science major, in which I had to take a philosophy course that covered Hegel. I had the toughest time understanding him, and Hegel still confuses me to this day. I can read and reread his words, but I just don't get what he's saying. Feels the same with super intelligent AIs like ChatGPT. When we ask it questions, there always seems to be some randomness. And this factor can wind up giving you either amazing results, but at other times it can leave you scratching your head at its hallucinations and, frankly, its stupidity. If you have this problem, though, it might not be the AI. It might be your prompts. There are hacks to how you can craft them. And this has given rise to a whole field, prompt engineering. Our guest co-founded a 50-person marketing agency called Ladder and has designed courses on LinkedIn Learning and Udemy that 350,000 people have taken. And he was a very early user of large language models, which are the brains behind generative AIs like ChatGPT. He came on the show in episode 168 for his book, Marketing Memetics. And in 2024, he's come out with an O'Reilly book that is titled Prompt Engineering for Generative AI. So let's go to Liverpool, England to talk with Mike Taylor. Mike Taylor, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here again.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about this book. Can you tell me about this book that you have recently come out with through O'Reilly?
Yeah, so we just finished. Actually, it's going to the printers on Wednesday, so it feels like a big relief. We've been working on it for a year and a half, and as you know, AI is changing quite a bit week to week. Actually, yesterday was our deadline, and OpenAI decided to announce a bunch of new stuff yesterday. So we had to quickly make some final edits late last night. But yeah, we've been working on this book, and the topic is prompt engineering. And prompt engineering, for anyone who doesn't know, haven't heard that term yet, is really this kind of emerging skill set, or some people think it might be a job, where you find the right combination of words, you find the right combination of systems to string together to get AI to automate some of your work. So I actually work now full-time as a prompt engineer across various projects, some my own, some for clients. And, that's what I'm doing day in, day out. I'm A/B testing different prompts, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then helping the clients scale that up to a full kind of AI application that maybe writes blog content for you, or does something else that is valuable to your business, or in a lot of cases it's internal templates. And like one example, I worked with a marketing agency that wanted me to automate the search query reports they were doing through Google. So it could actually go through and find negative keywords for you, and do a little bit of reasoning on whether that keyword should be included or not in your search campaigns. So there's a world of possibilities. Everyone's just now getting to grips with AI, and they're starting to experiment with this stuff. And prompt engineering is really what you need to get out of that experimentation kind of trial and error phase and get into production. Start relying on these systems for your day-to-day work.
Yeah, and so you're using phrases that help us understand that there's way more that you can do. When you describe it as a system and that you can engineer things, this is beyond, I think, what many people begin with, me included.
Mm-hmm.
Many marketers will, have begun using, we take the paradigms of things we know in the past. So if we knew search engines, we sit in front of a tool like ChatGPT or Claude, and we ask it a retrieval type question, and boom, it comes back with the facts, and it's, written in a nice sentence, and we're very impressed. However, what you're saying is those are simply built into every model, and they're the most genericized part of it. They, sure, it can do that. That's like automatic mode for it. However, you're saying that there are many pieces to this that are manual, where you can dial in to get what you want, and the output that you can get out of it can be, we'll get into this more, but way more than just tell me the answer to question X.
Yeah, exactly. And I try and bring it back to an analogy to help people understand it, of how do we work with other intelligences, right? Like how do we work with other humans? And you'll find a lot of the stuff you have to do to get AI to work is also, there's a lot of analogs to human management principles as well. So I'll give you the example, like prompt engineering. You probably don't need prompt engineering for most tasks day to day that you're using ChatGPT for. It's only really needed at scale when you're doing that task, hundreds or thousands of times. And the analogy I would use is McDonald's. So if you had like a local restaurant and you made burgers, your homemade recipe, and you had one employee, you don't need like an employee handbook, right? Like you can talk to that employee, you can go through trial and error, right? If they do something wrong, you can tell them straight away, and correct that. And then over time, they kind of learn how to take over the work from you, right? Well, if you're running McDonald's, it's very different. You need to be able to handle hundreds of thousands of employees, all in different countries. It's a scale problem, and therefore, McDonald's has developed all of these kind of sets of instructions. Like, here's exactly how you flip a hamburger, right? So that every single time they flip the hamburger, whether it's in China or New York or London, it's flipped in the same way and for the same amount of time, and therefore the product that you get is reliable. And that's what prompt engineering is. It's finding a way to write those instructions so that instead of a human flipping a burger, it's an AI writing a blog post or whatever task you're using it for. Those, like, finding the right set of instructions in order to scale that task to hundreds or thousands of uses.
Great way to put it. And so let's remember that its repertoire, how it knows how to make a burger, is because the folks who built these models took large chunks of the internet and dumped them into the model. And this is an important thing that you point out, how we need to also understand, while your analogy is great, there are places at the edge of that where we have to understand this is alien intelligence compared to our human intelligence. So, right, and that we had better pay heed to these small nuanced differences. So one of them you point out is that, so the training data, which is what they call that large body, that corpus that is dumped into it and then tuned and aligned, that we have to be aware of areas where it might not have as much to go by. And so
Mhm.
while many of us make, very broad um, prompts that there will be tons of information in the data bank that it's referencing, there could be times where we're being so narrow and specific that it won't have information back for us. However, because of the way that it's, built, what pieces it has under the hood to manage our query, it will try to answer, but it'll do a poor job.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about that and kind of how it has taken information and broken it apart so that it can try to give us those answers. Because if we don't know those limits, we might run afoul of the model, giving us word salad. But it's not the model's fault. It's really because we didn't think to ask the right question.
Yeah, exactly. And if you raised a human purely on reading things on the internet, they would turn out pretty weird as well, right?
Ooh,
They would make
yeah.
some odd mistakes. So you have to give these models credit that they can do anything useful at all. But yeah, like I would say the types of tasks that these models do really well at are tasks where there are lots of examples of that task online. So it is great at writing blog content. If you, with a little bit of work. But one of the things that a lot of people mess up on is that they don't give it enough direction as to what that blog post should be or what that social post should be. Like, what's the writing style they want it in? What type of hook do they want? There's a million different ways to write a blog post, right? There's a million different ways to do any task. And if you're just saying, write me a blog post, if that's your prompt, then what you're going to get back is the average of the training data or the average of the internet, right? And you don't want an average blog post. You want something that you subjectively think is good. ChatGPT doesn't know that subjective part. Like it doesn't have subjective human experience. You need to
Mhm.
provide that part. So you're the secret sauce that kind of makes that output unique. And the nice thing is, like, a lot of the work that goes into doing the primary research or kind of thinking through what exactly do you want and how should you communicate that to a model. That's really the important part that makes your output unique and gives you something that's not just easily detectable as AI generated content.
Yeah. And so this is where, while we're starting from that um, training data that it's, using, as you said, the average of the internet, there's far more that we can do when we expand how we're doing it over the course of a conversation. So you talk about there being one shots versus being few shots. And,
Mm.
I can, sports analogies come to my mind when you say that. Things like, someone standing at half court in basketball and, just simply trying to get a huge, skyhook shot to go in the first time rather than someone who is going with a team and, theirs may hit the rim and bounce out, but there's somebody right there to catch it and do the assist, bring it in and complete the shot. You talk about, and you've mentioned already one or two of them, the kind of principles that you outline that we need to do: the giving direction, specifying format, and telling it some examples and encouraging it to think of itself in a role. But that biggest one that you just mentioned was to evaluate its quality. So this is where it's hearing back from you and it's getting um, kind of it's getting its backside kicked because it's not told to go back into the data, but it's told to pay attention to the critiques that and suggestions you're giving. I don't think we give that enough attention, but you say that that is one of the largest drivers of good performance and a better quality output.
Yeah, so there's a lot in there to unpack, but yeah, two of the main kind of points I would say that people get wrong is one, they don't give it enough examples of what they want. That's the difference between zero shot response. Zero shot is basically when it's asked to give an answer to a question or to complete a task without any examples. And then a few shot is where you give it, say, like 1, 2, 3, 10, 100 examples of that task being done, right? So, take it back to your basketball analogy. If I just handed you a basketball and said, shoot it in the net, you'd be like, do what now? And you've seen basketball, you've seen that, that game on TV, right? And you think, okay, well, I'll just kind of do what they did, right? And you would try, but you would probably fail. And anyone who's ever learned basketball, they'll recognize this. What then happens is you go, no, hold it up. And then and then throw it like in this way and bend your wrist at the end, right?
Right.
And aim for the square, right? So that is you learning from imitation. That is you learning from an example where they're saying that no, you did that wrong. Like, here's how you should do it. Here's how I want you to do it in order to be successful. So the reason why that analogy works is, AI could know everything it could ever want to know about basketball, except it's never thrown a ball, right? In the same way that AI could know everything there is to know about your industry potentially, but it hasn't done that specific task in your company. There are kind of rules that it hasn't learned yet, and there's some things that it gets wrong. Once you see it in action, you'll see what it did wrong. So giving examples up front of exactly what you want it to do, like if you've walked it through 3 or 4 examples, it's almost definitely going to get the task right at the end of that. And then equally, then you just checking whether it did get the task right. Like in basketball, it's pretty easy because either the ball goes in the hoop or it doesn't. So you have a pretty good evaluation framework there. Like, you can count the points. Whereas in a lot of the tasks that we're doing, it's pretty hard to evaluate whether it did a good job. And we struggle with this, not just with AI, but with humans as well. So a lot of my work is really in figuring out, what does good look like? Is this a good ad for Facebook ads, or is it a bad ad for Facebook ads? Right? It's pretty hard to tell, right? And everyone might have a different opinion. So, you need to find some way, to dictate that, these are good qualities of ads, these are bad qualities of ads, and we can measure them. And once you can measure them, then you can give the AI feedback, and not just give it feedback so it can correct its mistakes, but also you can correct the prompt and start A/B testing. Once you have this evaluation metric that says, okay, this ad is worth 10 points and that ad is worth 15 points, then you can tally the points for prompt A versus prompt B. In the same way that, once you have a conversion rate metric that you're tracking on your website, you can A/B test your landing page. So it's using a lot of the same skills that I used as a marketer in growth before. But it's doing it instantly. You don't have to wait for 2 weeks to conclude the A/B test, right? Like, you can just run it 200 times, like today. It takes a few minutes, and then you get an immediate response. Okay, well, prompt A definitely outperformed prompt B.
Right, and this is just a great example of how you say that using it kind of in a conversational way, or working through a problem way with it. This takes us well beyond just some of those template phrases that people put out on the internet. Oh, if you just paste this into your prompt. But I think
those things,
one of the things,
those guys are charlatans. I mean, actually, we had the same problem in growth marketing as well. As soon as it became a desirable profession and people found that they could get paid more if they called themselves a growth hacker, then that's when all the spammers and people who would send tons of cold emails here are my 100 best growth hacks, right? And we did a little bit of that at Ladder, my agency, but whenever someone is selling you a big list of prompts, that's usually not a good sign, because the people who are really doing this for actual applications that work in the wild, they don't really boil it down to one prompt necessarily. They're building a system of okay, this prompt solves this task, and then the output of that prompt goes into the next prompt, and then and we have this evaluation metric for this, we have this evaluation metric for that. So it is a whole kind of growth system, that you're stringing things together. it's very rare that it's just like, oh, this one weird trick. Like if you just add this word into your prompt, it's going to change everything. Like that is like unfortunately capturing the imagination, but it's not really what prompt engineering is about.
Yeah, this is about, doing it genuinely, not just using some kind of cheat code. And I think one of the main things that helped, at least for me, the book explain that was how it puts me as the person engineering the LLM in the position of realizing how it has to think through a problem. So there's a few things that, I needed to understand. I needed to understand a context window. So I needed to realize, oh, it has a certain number of things that, yes, it'll have in its training data, but I can add to that training data by, let's say, pointing it to a vectorized database or using some, I could give it text, maybe even with markup language in it, or I can try to even pre-process that. Now, this gets into a little bit of using some programming, but I can check the way that the words are going into it so that they are chopped up. That's my phrase, in the way that I will at least know it's understanding the most important parts of my additional information,
Yeah.
rather than it just being arbitrarily cut up. And then I suppose the other large one is to think for it by chunking the problem down into the steps that are of a small enough and discrete enough nature that it can uh, do each of them independently and then daisy chain those together to achieve a larger one. And I'll
Yeah.
just let you on that. Just take any of those on and give us a sense of what more we must know for how it's actually doing this very complex problem solving.
Yeah, so vector databases, it's a scary topic, and it makes people's eyes glaze over when you start talking about it. But it is actually like pretty straightforward once you understand and get past the jargon. But it's a really important one to understand because it's not currently a huge feature of ChatGPT that you're going to be using day to day right now. But it is going to be the a very, very important thing to think about for and like in the next few months, it's going to become more prominent that you'll need to be able to think about it. It's also something that like everyone building an AI application, it's one of the ways that they get their application to actually work for users.
Yep.
So it's important to understand it. So what is a vector database? It is just like any database. Like you could have something in SQL, or you can have just some files saved on your computer, like Excel files. Well, a vector database is similar to that, but the difference is that you look things up not based on an ID or like based on a keyword, but you look them up based on similarity. So a vector is just a string of numbers, and each number represents a feature of that data. So you can think about if you had, just two vectors, two numbers, and you can imagine here, if you come with me on this journey for a second, if you imagine like a two-dimensional chart, like just a x-axis and a y-axis. Now, if you have the y-axis is how manly this object is, right, or this subject is. And man versus woman, right? So it's a 1 if it's a
Okay.
man, it's a 0 if it's a woman. And then you have on the x-axis you have age, right? So it's a 1 if they're an adult, and it's a 0 if they're a child. So you only have two features, right? You have two things it could be, and it could be a 1 or a 0, just to keep it really simple. Now, the thing in the bottom left corner, which would be a 0 for man, so that means it's a woman, and it would be a 0 for adult, which means it's a child, so a female child. If we're talking in terms of royalty, female child would be a princess, right? And then if you move to the right, so if you took the same thing and then you just dialed up that to an adult instead of a child, then princess would turn into a queen, right? Same thing if you dialed up the other direction and you went north. If you went from 00 to 10, so you took a princess and then you added
Yes.
manliness, then that would be a prince, right?
Gotcha.
And if you
Yeah.
maxed out on both stats, right? If you went 1-1, so an adult male in the royal family would be the king, right? So that's a really simple example with just two features. But when you're working with these things and you call OpenAI and say, give me the numbers for this specific paragraph of text or this specific word, they send you back like 1,000, I think it's 1,536 numbers for that paragraph of text. And you don't know what any of those numbers mean. You don't actually have to know. The AI knows, but it's what the AI has learned based on similarity. So things that are very similar to each other will be close together in those numbers, and things that are really far away in those, in similarity would be, like have very different numbers. And you can calculate that mathematically. I don't actually know how to run the formula, but there are plenty of open source libraries that do it for you, which is kind of nice. And long story short, what you get to is, instead of searching directly for a specific keyword in a document, you can just search by things that are similar to that keyword. Now, that's a long explanation, but why is that important? Like, what does it actually do for you? Well, imagine you're talking to ChatGPT and you say, by the way, my name is Mike. And it goes, great, I'll remember that in the future. Now, there are only so many messages that can fit in that context window. So when you're talking to ChatGPT, if you paste in too much text, eventually it'll say, like, sorry, your responses are too long, and it'll ask you to start a new session. And every time you start a new session, it wipes the memory, right? So you're like talking to a different person.
And then at the end, you say, what was my name? And if you've gone on too long, it'll say, I don't remember.
Exactly. Yeah. And or if you're starting a new session, then it doesn't have that message anymore, right?
Right.
So what a vector database would allow it to do, and ChatGPT just added this memory feature, this is how it works, is that it could go back and look at past conversations that aren't even in this current session, and it doesn't have to search exactly by keyword, right? So I said, my name is Mike, but then in the future, say like a couple of days from now, I might say, can you tell me what my name is, right? So, what would it search for? Like, it might search for name, but then there might be other messages where I said the word name that didn't have anything to do with my name. Maybe I told you 100 people's names, right?
Correct.
So that's going to bring back 100 messages, and most of which are irrelevant. So it's still like not finding that needle in the haystack. Whereas if it looks up a vector search, it's going to find the most relevant message to that query. So it's gonna pull out just that one sample where even though I didn't say the exact same keywords, it will still find it in terms of similarity. So it's the same way that Google search works now. By the way, Google isn't just keyword search anymore. They have broad match, right? And you can think about this as broad match. Like, it kind of gets at the same meaning as
semantics.
Yeah, exactly. Semantic search, right? So that's what a vector database is, and there's a ton of like complexity behind the scenes that I'm glossing over, but like that's all you really have to think about as an application builder, because some very smart people have built these tools to like allow you to do this pretty simply. So not only could AI look up things in a document, look up things in a memory, in the memory of past conversations, but it could also look up things in your company documents, or look up things on the internet, whatever it is. So it can pull in the right information into that window so that it is making a better decision when it's answering you. Like, it will know what your name is. When you're searching for a specific keyword, you say president, right? Like, it might think you mean the president of the US, right? But it might you wanted to know about the president of your company. So if you upload your company documents, then it will understand that that's the context in which you're looking for it. It can do that semantic search. So that's like my little vector database primer, but it is behind a lot of the things that a lot of the actual AI tools that really work in production that people are actually using, doing some sort of lookup and then putting that information into the prompt in the back end. You might not see it necessarily, but that's how it's so good compared to when you're just chatting with ChatGPT.
Right. And this notion of it's so good is, as I read it, it's those relevant associations that you have provided it, and then it's doing all that stuff that we know it does as a matter of course, like morphing the words into a coherent answer. And when it does those two things, and we say to it, well, I want this answered as if you are speaking to a new customer prospect, or I want you speaking to this as if you're speaking to a disgruntled existing customer, that you're serving, and it can just do those things. This is where it starts to really show off its brilliance. And
Exactly.
I want to get further.
Customer service
Right?
is a great use case for this vector database search, because you can't possibly pull in like every single ticket it's ever responded to, right? Like or every single ticket that every human has responded to. Not only would that like maybe confuse it, but it would also cost a lot of money. Like if you're using AI in your application, you actually have to pay per call to ChatGPT, and not just that, but like per word, essentially per token is what they charge. A token is just like 3/4 of a word on average. So it ends up being very expensive if you're stuffing like hundreds of customer service responses into the prompt. But with this ability to retrieve information through a vector search, you can just find what are the 3 most similar scenarios to this from the past, and it might pull in, okay, well, this customer has a really niche problem. Like they have a problem where they booked with a specific provider, but then that provider didn't turn up on the day, right? Like maybe they booked for a hotel and the hotel didn't turn up. Hotel manager didn't turn up, or whatever. Or they switched into a different room. Now it's going to be able to find semantically the most similar cases from the history of the customer service of that organization and pull in and say, okay, like here are 3 similar situations. Here's how we responded. And then it's going to just do a much better job of responding when it has that context, just like a human would, right? Like if a human could search the database and go, or search their memory and go, hey, like when have I seen this before? Then following that information, like following that example, you're just going to do a better job.
Yes, and the thing that we are able to do is, using, and I think one of the things you were talking about there with retrieval is retrieval augmented generation, RAG, is
that's what this is labeled. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So it's
you can
called RAG.
intelligently insert the things it needs, right? You can figure out, okay, if we're making this particular chatbot to work in this use case, it's going to need these pieces of information every time. So why don't I just kind of give it that context window out of the gate so that it can combine that with its general, transformative goodness and, achieve a good result.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, this is also how Microsoft Office Copilot works, right? It's looking through all of your business documents and finding, okay, when was the last time we did a TPS report, right? And then, pulling that into the prompt. Same thing. I don't know if, how many of your audience dabble with coding, but I do a bunch of coding every day, and using GitHub Copilot, that's what that does as well. It actually looks at what are the past 10 tabs that you had open, and then it does like a search on that to find, okay, the function that you're writing right now, like what are like other similar functions you've written like this, and what does it connect to? What in the code, like what other things does it call? And then based on that information, that's how it's smart enough to actually continue writing the code and auto complete the code for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this ability to give it that proprietary data that we have and that we don't necessarily want just going out into a general model that's putting it together with the rest of the internet. This is a truly powerful application. Taking the storehouse of data that we have that humans would know what to do with, but feeding it into this is very, very powerful stuff. And I want to get into how we can even contemplate AI taking it to the next level where it's going to take action. But before we do that, we're going to take a short break.
I'll step away to address one thing that's been missing from Funnel Reboot: the ability to access the text of any show. I'm glad to finally announce that the podcast is now fully searchable and copyable thanks to the transcript feature in YouTube. Yes, YouTube. Now, if shows are audio only, they are all on YouTube. Whether you're looking for a specific episode, a topic, or want to search the full text of a show for a specific part, go on to YouTube, head to Funnel Reboot's channel. Okay, now let's get back to the show.
So, Mike, we've got the basic building blocks here, and now we want to contemplate how we could get an AI to act on proprietary information that we have, plus its general body of training data, but actually, go further and make things or do things. And there's a whole bunch of chapters that delve into image generation, and I encourage people to go look at that. But I would like us to focus perhaps on actual actions that something can take when we're putting it in a real world scenario and we want it to either touch another tool with an API, or where we want to take it into providing a user with something that is more than just a pat answer to a question. Tell us a little bit of what we need to know to do that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the answer right now is that you probably need to know how to code, right? So, most of the really exciting things that you can do with AI right now, especially with the state of the art type stuff that's just coming out every week, having some technical ability is really helpful. That said, I would say there are three areas where things are starting to get a lot more accessible. And even if you don't know how to code, but you're like a good systems thinker, you can start building today and start taking advantage of some of the stuff that I've been talking about. So the simplest, easiest one, I would say this is the most relevant for marketers. This is kind of how I eventually, this is my gateway drug into coding was using Excel and Google Sheets. So there are some plugins for Google Sheets already, like in the Chrome store, where you can pull ChatGPT into your Google Sheets. And I'm sure Google's working on bringing their LLMs into Google Sheets. Microsoft is bringing theirs into Excel as well. So I would say that that's probably the quickest, most accessible way to take advantage, where the AI can kind of take actions for you. One really good example I had recently was I had a marketing agency. They wanted to classify all of the comments they got on ads as either like delete this comment, hide this comment, or respond. Because they were getting hundreds of comments on their ads. So you're showing the ads to millions of people. And a lot of the comments were like either spam or people complaining or people saying the competitor was better, right? And when you're paying for an ad and then you have all these like social comments underneath and some of them are bad, that can really hurt the performance of the ad. But nobody wants to sit there, like even...
what a mind-numbing job.
Even if you outsource this to the Philippines or something, like there's like a limit to what any human like was willing to put up with, right? For any amount of money. So it's just such a boring job, and they found whenever they outsource it to people, they do pretty well for a couple of weeks, and then they get really tired of doing it. So they automated the process completely with just an Excel Google Sheets plugin and just a prompt that basically gave it the right context to decide whether that should be marked as spam or not. So they did have to get an engineer to like take all the ads comments and then dump them into a spreadsheet on a weekly basis, but then everything else was automated with AI, and nobody on the team needed to know how to code to use that spreadsheet. So I think like that is a really good example, and what they get back is like literally a 1 if the comment should be reviewed, and a 0 if it shouldn't be reviewed, and then someone on the team could literally click through on that link and go to that comment and then click hide, or do that manually if they wanted. But you could also automate that part too. So I'd say, that's a good example. Yeah, that's a good example of AI actually like making a decision to take action, right?
That's right. And the thing that I found completely novel here was, compared to some of those simplified automations that we've had in past that are rules based. If it's this, then do that.
Mhm.
That kind of thing could be done with macros in a spreadsheet. But this is more, I'm going to give it a goal, and then you describe a reason action framework that this thing is going to loop through until it feels that it has completed at least a subtask. And then we get into the fun of that subtask could shoot over, when it's done that little part, it could shoot its output to the next subtask, which is
Yep.
going to do something else with it. And again, this daisy chain effect of when you get it all back, the whole is certainly greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly. And once you get one thing working, then you free up more time to automate the next thing, right? So one of the second thing they added to that spreadsheet was they translated, right? So they used another call
Right.
to AI in another cell, like in another column, and that would just take the text and then translate it to English, because some of the ads were running in Germany and France, and the person who was making these calls, like they only spoke English, so. Now the AI is like actually pretty good at translation, so now they can read the text for themselves and make that decision without having to involve a native speaker, and that frees up even more time to then automate the next chain in the process.
And the extensibility of this, which is, I guess, a fancy way of saying the way you can chain this together, is vast. When I think of how, we bring in this idea of an agent, right? So it's actually going and making a call to that other thing. As you say, maybe there's another library that handles that translation, or it maybe shoots that to an external system. Maybe it's going into WordPress and actually, making some modification to word copy because of this. It just keeps going. And I think the thing that really helps me in seeing how widely applicable this is that we can even then, once we have this whole thing running, we can, with the help of a programmer, have ourselves acting as a intermediary system between the LLM and an end user, like a customer. So we actually can just leave it be and work its magic directly with them. But we have provided all of that kind of, you described it as a system or application layer logic on top of the base LLM. And so what the end user is seeing seems like, maybe a digital replica of me, or a digital replica of our very best customer service rep. That to me is truly powerful.
Yeah, and I would say agent is one of those words that, like, as soon as people realized they could raise a ton of VC funding by mentioning the word agent, AI agent, then suddenly it became meaningless, right? But yeah,
overhyped.
Yeah, exactly. So I would really differentiate between true agent and then just like automating tasks with AI. And I only mentioned one of the accessible ways to work with AI right now. But I'll mention the other two, and then I think that will kind of give the definition pretty cleanly. So, out of Excel, you want to connect Excel or Google Sheets into other things. That's when you kind of work together into a chain of tasks that you define, and that's when you start to get into using something like Zapier, right? And I know how to code, but I still use Zapier because Zapier can connect multiple things together in a chain, and you can say, okay, well, when I get an email, I want to summarize the contents of that email from the client, right? So Zapier receives the email, and then it sends it on to the next thing in the chain, right? The next thing in the chain is AI, and the AI can, Zapier has a connector to ChatGPT, and it can send it the email and then get the summary and response, and then it passes on to the next part of the chain, and whatever you want to do with it, you can dump that into a Google Sheet or whatever. So Zapier, I would say, is that other kind of no-code tool where if you combine it with Google Sheets, you can have your data in Google Sheets, and you can have Zapier orchestrating the whole thing. So I'd say that's like the next step, and where you don't have to know how to code to do that as well, which is very nice.
No.
So that's the other accessible thing you can do. And I would say like 80-90% of AI applications you want to use can be built with just those two things right now. But there is a third, right, which we'll get onto in a sec, where it's like a bit more agentic. But yeah, do you have any questions about Zapier and how I'd use that?
No, I mean, it's a API of APIs, right? Anything to anything.
Yeah. So hopefully the audience is like pretty familiar with it, because it's been a mind-blowing productivity tool for like years and years and years. But now with AI, it's like even more useful, because you can automate fuzzier tasks, right? But yeah, then I would say I would still say that isn't an agent though, because you're defining the chain. You're just saying task A happens and then task B happens, and then you might have some conditions, and you say like, if this then that. If the summary doesn't come back, then try again, or like if we categorize this as spam, then go do this other thing. That you're still orchestrating, like you're still defining the steps. An agent is that my definition of an agent is that's where the AI defines the steps instead of you. Yes. So the AI decides what to do next. And that's, currently like basically no agents actually work. There is a ton of experimentation. You can basically ignore all of it right now. From a practical perspective, I haven't. There's only one agent that I've seen that really works, and that's in production, and that is the code interpreter or advanced data analysis in ChatGPT. And they're the only ones who've really gotten it right, to the point where like an average person on the street could figure out how it works. I would say there is a ton of really cool experimentation going on, but you don't have to worry about the hype yet. Right now, AI isn't very good at deciding what step to take next. It's relatively unreliable. It's much less reliable than a human. And just in general, if AI struggles to do a task, and then you ask it to the critique whether it did a good task or not, it's also going to struggle to critique it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But we could be on the way to full-blown applications that we don't really write. We just indicate to it, make an application that does something like this. And
exactly. Yeah.
Say, we have to tutor it, but it may be able to do that, which brings us to, I think, what the most important effect of the book is for a marketer, which is that the onus comes back on you, dear marketer, to come up with use cases that will use this power. You have to dream those up, but if you can dream them up, it over time will be able to do it.
Yeah, and when you're working with AI, I would say you kind of have to start working on things that don't work yet, because I made this mistake and been blindsided a couple of times. I started to build something. I'm like, it's possible to do this now, so I'm going to make that into a tool. And all of those things that I've tried that fit that form factor just completely failed, because if it already works right now, then you can guarantee there was someone working on it 6 months ago.
True.
Copy.ai, they were one of the first AI copywriting tools. They actually started building their company when GPT-2 was around, I believe. And it was terrible, right? Like it performed very badly, but they saw the potential, right? And then when GPT-3 came out, then it started to work. And that was when I started using Copy AI. And now like actually ChatGPT is already like pretty amazing at writing content. So like, I don't know how well Copy AI and Jasper and all these other tools are doing. I think they're still doing pretty well, but like, by and large, like OpenAI is kind of eating their lunch, right? Like ChatGPT is now pretty good at this in it of itself, right? I had the same experience. I built a tool that used AI voice to interview you, just like you're interviewing me right now on this podcast, and ask you questions about a topic, and then turn that transcript into a blog. We were like developing this, I think on a Tuesday or whatever, and we knew OpenAI was announcing something like the next day, but we didn't think it would be anything to do with this. We were like, oh, we'll put this live like tomorrow. Right, we hadn't quite finished all the squishing all the bugs. Well, what did OpenAI release? What was their ChatGPT voice?
That's something that can do it.
Right? So our demo went from being like amazing, like nobody else could do this, to just being mundane because ChatGPT does it for free. And seeing a lot,
and there will be times where there will be times where we get scooped if we are truly trying to do that ideation for products that many can use. But I think where we're safe is looking within the confines of our own companies, and that proprietary data that is currently locked away in systems that are not helpful unless we put a human's eyeballs on the screen. That's a true area where it will be both useful 6 months or a year or longer from now, but it will also only be getting better as the capabilities of the base LLM gets better.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really tough few years if you are a provider of AI, because you're going to have to try and attract the best talent, but like they all have a million job offers, right? And then you're going to have to like do a lot of hard work and experimentation, but then that can just get wiped out by someone else coming in and doing it better. You want to be in a position where you're a consumer of AI and you're just benefiting from all this innovation happening. Like if you are afraid of GPT-5 coming out, then you're probably in the wrong business right now. You should be excited that, when GPT-5 comes out, it's finally going to make this internal tool that I use in my company better. That is the position you want to be in. So I think actually marketing agencies are in a really good position because, for the first time, we're probably going to have, software level margins for services. If for agencies that fully adopt AI, right? Like you could have software level margins as an agency, which is like pretty amazing. At least in the short term.
And this ideation isn't limited to the agency. The in-house marketer, of course, can be the one who hatches the idea and then, involves parties to help make it happen.
Exactly. And you might find you don't need an agency anymore, right? Or in specific arees, or maybe
anything's possible, right?
But like you have a different relationship with the agency. Maybe they're out there doing more like innovation work and you've already automated a lot of the day-to-day, so you don't have to pay a human to do that anymore, and you free them up to do more strategic, interesting stuff.
And this is, I guess, the best place for us to end, because this is what, no matter which arena you're looking in, you're going to see that AI is able to augment our own intelligence. And yes, it's uncomfortable because we're feeling that, well, it's going to take my job, but it's now giving you the opportunity to focus most, if not all, of your time just on the portions of your role that are uniquely, able to be done by you, the human.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mentioned two accessible ways like Zapier and Google Sheets, but I wanted to kind of mention that third because I think it's probably the most useful right now for people to learn what's possible with AI. And that is
us there.
Yeah, that is the GPT store. So like the custom GPTs that you've heard about. Literally just yesterday, so like breaking news, they just made that free and available to everyone. So you don't have to pay $20 a month anymore to get access to that. And I think that is, the App Store moment for OpenAI. I mean, it's you can think about it like the Apple App Store where, there's an app for everything. Yeah. Well, in the future, there's going to be a GPT for everything potentially, right? And you have your own kind of custom GPTs you have internally at your company, and you'll have ones externally that are just useful for specific tasks. For example, there's a Canva GPT. I don't know if you've ever used Canva, but one of the cool things it can do is like if you're designing a brochure or an ad or something like that, you can just talk to it in ChatGPT, and then it like sends you a link to the Canva project where it's done for you. That is like basically like hiring a designer, right? And the reason why I think that GPTs are worth exploring is not because you're going to be doing 80% of your work through GPTs in the next year. I think you'll probably be doing less than 10% of your work through GPTs, to be honest, over the next year. But it is where everything is going. So if you start today, making custom GPTs, then you can start to understand what they're good at, what they're bad at. And I think that's going to set you up really well in the future, because, with GPTs, that's really the only place you can get access to agentic behavior without having to know how to code. You can just there's two really killer features of GPTs. One is obviously you can write your own custom prompt, but the two killer things are it has retrieval built in. So we talked about vector databases before. You don't have to understand any of that. You don't have to know how to code it. You could just upload your PDFs, upload your documents to your custom GPT, and OpenAI does that for you. So that's one benefit. The other thing is it has the ability to call APIs for you. So just like Zapier can, send that summary to an email or save it to a database or, send it on to the next Zap, right? Custom GPTs have like a early version of being able to take action on your behalf. So you can say, every time it's sunny, I want to text my friend to say the sun's shining, right? Or whatever it is. You can actually it can actually take action on your behalf, and importantly, it's deciding when to take action based on the context that you've given it. So that's like probably the best place as a non-technical person to really dive in and explore agentic behavior, see how often it goes wrong, and then just be along for the ride when GPT-5 comes out.
That's right. Yeah, the only limits are our imagination, basically. Mike, if people want to get the book, which I encourage them to do, or to reach out to you, where would you send them?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon for pre-order. The should be out next month. We just sent it to the printers. So I would say though, maybe I shouldn't discourage people, but it is a software development book. Like, it is targeted at people who know how to code. So if you aren't currently like trying to learn how to code in Python, or you're not interested in learning how to code or don't have the time, it wouldn't be a good fit. There are plenty of other materials. We actually have like a prompt engineering course on Udemy that a lot of people have taken. It's free, Prompt Engineering Principles. I can provide you the link for that. So that might be an easier place to start. There's also, I would say, the book is like $80. So it's relative. It's like an academic textbook kind of price range. So it's not like an evening read. You know, it's something to have on your shelf to reference again and again. So that isn't always the best option. Even if you are you are learning how to code. We also have like a Udemy course, like a technical one that 70,000 people have taken. So you could also try that out. It's usually on sale on Udemy, and give that a go, just to kind of make sure that we, you make sure that you believe that we're talking sense and we know what we're talking about.
Sure.
But yeah, the book, the book is very different from the course in that it is like to that standard that O'Reilly demands. We spent actually more time editing the book than we did writing it in the first place, which is kind of nuts. It was like over a year. We went through 7 technical reviewers. So I would say it is like extremely condensed information, and should save you a lot of time if you are like trying to learn how to build these systems. Yeah.
And if people want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn the best place?
Yeah, LinkedIn is good. Also on Twitter, I'm hammer_MT. I have like a Twitter addiction. I'm always on there, you'll see.
Excellent. Mike, can't thank you enough. And to those of you listening, take this, use your imagination. Go get better insights into how you're using GPT so you can get better insights into your marketing so you can make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @FunnelReboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.